The Pokemon season is already underway, and with a few regional championships having already passed, the first of the international championships are fast approaching. Although it always begs the question, what deck should I play for the event? And while no one knows what deck will come out on top, we have a pretty good idea based on previous results. Again, all of these decks are matchup dependent, and there are a lot of variables when playing in an event of the scale of an international championships that one should be aware of, such as what techs they run, variants of the builds they're playing, and even things like the results of the other players which can affect your placing on the day. Although just before we do go into the video, if you do like this type of content and you'd like to see some more Pokemon related content for the trading card game, as always be sure to hit that subscribe button and of course like this video. And with all that said, here are our top 10 decks for the Latin American International Championships for the 2024-25 season.
Number 10.
At number 10 comes in Palkia VSTAR. Palkia VSTAR is a card that's been around for a while now, however it still seems to keep finding its way back into the format. By turn 2, once you have your Palkia VSTAR out, you can use its VSTAR power, Star Portal, to attach up to 3 water energy from your discard pile to any of your water Pokemon. Once you've filled up your bench, and your opponent starts putting down some Pokemon of their own, you can then start attacking with Subspace Swell, which does 60 damage, plus 20 more for each Pokemon on the bench, both yours and your opponent's. With Dusknoir, and that additional 13 damage counters, can pretty much knock out anything in the format. The deck, while not the best in the format, offers a lot of consistency, and while it does lose to some other decks that are very hard hitting like Lugia, and some stall decks like Snorlax, the deck has a lot of consistency cards such as Radiant Greninja, Mew EX, and Pheasant PT EX to name a few. So if consistency is your thing, then perhaps Palkia might be worth the play.
Number 9.
At number 9 comes Gardevoir EX, which has always been a pretty solid choice, and going into the Latin American International Championships proves to be no different. Gardevoir EX has the ability Psychic Embrace, which attaches psychic energy from your discard pile to your psychic Pokemon, while in the process, putting 2 damage counters on your Pokemon. While this normally would seem like a bad trade-off, you have cards like Drifloon and Screamtail, which deal more damage for the damage counters that they have on them. Other notable inclusions include Munkidori to move the damage counters from your Pokemon to your opponents, setting up some big plays, as well as Curlier, the Stage 1 form, and Radiant Greninja as your built-in draw engine, allowing you to discard those energy cards and then get them back later on in the game with Gardevoir EX. In terms of matchups, Gardevoir has had a bit of a setback with the rise of Darkness type Pokemon, with decks like Charizard EX and Roaring Moon having become more prominent. Decks like Dragapult EX and Regidrago VSTAR can also spread damage across your board, knocking out small basics like your Rolts and disrupting your setup. That said, Gardevoir EX is still always pretty solid, and perhaps we might see it feature at this year's Latin American International Championships.
Number 8.
At number 8 comes Snorlax, a deck that keeps coming in and out of the format in terms of popularity. Once trainers stop teching against it is when it seems to come back into the spotlight. While most games are won by taking all of your prize cards, Snorlax simply aims to deck your opponent out while using up all of their resources. With its ability Block, the defending Pokemon is unable to manually retreat, and since you don't rely on taking prizes, this deck is also generally very heavy on counter catchers to bring up things to the active spot and pretty much leave them stranded. It's also renowned for playing cards like Mimikyu for its safeguard ability, as well as Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX to stop Pokemon with abilities attacking. Subject to the deck that you're facing, and when played correctly, sometimes it can prove to be not too difficult to play around Snorlax. Generally speaking, most trainers will prevent themselves from placing down too many Pokemon on the bench, and just focus on getting enough energy into play to make sure they're consistently taking knockouts. While trying to maintain a card advantage, Snorlax does tend to run Xerosix Mechanations to force your opponent to effectively discard their whole hand, while some builds try and run Erika's Invitation to drag things out from your opponent's hand and bring them into the active spot. While Snorlax can be a bit hit or miss, it's difficult to say whether it can win an event to the scale of the Latin American International Championships. However, I certainly wouldn't rule out playing against it.
Number 7.
At number 7, Terapagos EX is a new archetype that has come out of Stellar Crown. A colorless Pokemon and one of the new Terra Pokemon, the deck relies on getting out Area 0 Underdepths in order to fill up your bench and hit for some pretty big numbers with Unified Beatdown. In order to fill up your bench, there's a fair amount of Pokemon that can assist, such as Fanrotom and Noctowl to name a few. To get to those higher numbers, Dusknoir allows you to go for that additional push, hitting up to 350 worth of damage in a single turn. This deck does lose down a little bit to decks like Dragapult EX and decks that are heavily focused on replacing stadiums. While it's not impossible to hit some numbers, with just 150 and no Area 0 in play, especially against those basic EXs, and Dusknoir in play, getting to those higher numbers of the Dragapults and the Charizard EXs does become a bit of a struggle. That said, the deck is still pretty new, and one that perhaps we'll see a variation of, or some interesting text for the Latin American International Championships.
Number 6.
At number 6 comes Lost Box, and while a lot of decks are focused on getting cards into the discard pile, this deck focuses on removing them to the Lost Zone. By using Comfey's Flower Selecting, you can use this card as a draw engine while also getting cards into the Lost Zone. When you have enough cards in the Lost Zone, you're then able to start attacking with cards like Sableye and Camarant. Overall, the deck has started to see less play, with less people teching against it, so perhaps Lost Box on this occasion could provide the surprise factor. There are less Jirachi going around, which makes Sableye more relevant, and in general across all the matchups, Lost Box has a pretty good conversion rate, so if you're looking for a deck that not many people are expecting, perhaps Lost Box could be the one.
Number 5.
At number 5 comes Dragapult EX, which has always been a pretty solid choice given how strong it is. It's seen quite a few different variations, paired with Charizard, however on this occasion being paired with Dusknoir. Phantom Dive deals 200 damage while putting 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon, which is already pretty solid since it does set up a lot of plays. However with Dusknoir, you can pretty much knock out most Pokemon in the format while spreading damage on the bench. The Stage 1 form in Dracloak provides for a good way of digging out those staples in order to assist in setting up, and you also have cards like Sparkling Crystal, one of the new A-Spec cards to ensure that you're attacking as quickly as possible. Other variants of Dragapult EX also include being paired with Pidgeot if you're looking for that little bit more consistency. The Pidgeot variant does seem to be a little bit more favourable in terms of across the matchups, with the Dusknoir variants losing out to some of the more notable top tier decks. Some hard-hitting decks that can attack as early as turn 1, like Raging Bolt, can be a problem, and some decks like Lost Box can be pretty unfavourable. Nonetheless, I would still fully expect to see Dragapult EX feature at this year's LAIC.
Number 4.
At number 4 comes Lugia VSTAR, which is always a pretty solid choice, and arguably the best deck in the format when set up properly. Through using its V-Star ability Summoning Star, you can choose Pokemon without a rule box to put onto your bench, with the notable targets being Archeops. When you have a couple of Archeops on your bench, you can then start searching for a variety of special energy cards to power up your Cinchinos, dealing 70 damage for every special energy card attached to it. Again, and when set up, there's not really too much that can stand up to Lugia, however the deck is a bit of a coin flip at times. If you're unable to get your Lugia V-Star out, and dish those Archeops, to then start attacking with either Cinchino or Iron Hands by turn 3 or 4 at the latest, sometimes it's pretty tough to come back from, often resulting in losing the game. That said, the deck is so strong that it's hard not to see it being played at the Latin American International Championships.
Number 3.
At number 3 comes arguably the fastest deck in the format in Raging Bolt, often being able to hit big numbers by going second but on your first turn. By using cards like Professor Sadder's Vitality and Teal Mask Ogopon EX's Teal Dance, you can attack with Bellowing Thunder, dealing 70 damage for each energy card that you discard. You also have cards like Radiant Greninja to get those energy cards into the discard pile while getting them back with Professor Sadder's. Since this deck is very reliant on EXs, anything with a Safeguard ability does become a bit of an issue unless you're playing something like Canceling Cologne. Some ancient Pokemon like Slitherwing might be worth a play, or even cards like Sandy Shocks, or some other alternatives might be cards such as Iron Bundle to help you against those stall decks like Snorlax. Generally speaking though, once your opponent has knocked out 3 Pokemon, they generally tend to win the game, but given the sheer speed and aggressiveness of this deck, I would fully expect it to feature and do well at the event.
Number 2.
At number 2 we have arguably one of the most consistent decks in the format in Charizard EX, now with the inclusion of Dusknoir, becomes a very solid play since the two seem to synergize together very well. Infernal Rain becomes your energy acceleration, while Burning Darkness deals 180 damage with 30 more for every prize card your opponent has taken. When conceding prize cards with Dusknoir, not only does it bump up the attack of Charizard, but you can also place that additional 13 damage counters on a Pokemon of your choice, hitting some bigger numbers. Sometimes this deck can be a little bit clunky, since it does rely on a lot of Stage 2s like Charizard, Pidgeot, and Dusknoir, but overall the deck is pretty solid and very techable. It can be vulnerable to decks that can pick off small basic Pokemon like Dragapult, and unlike decks like Lugia and Regidrago VSTAR, Charizard may not be seeing as many top 8s, but its performances getting itself into Day 2 of the bigger events speaks for itself. It's generally a very consistent deck, and if you're looking to get your invite for the Pokemon season, to go to the World Championships, and want to secure some Day 2 finishes to be in that points bracket, then perhaps Charizard EX could be worth the play.
Number 1.
At number 1 comes arguably the MVP of the format in Regidrago VSTAR, proving that so by winning multiple events and doing so well in previous tournaments. Regidrago's VSTAR ability is pretty solid in terms of helping to set up, but it's its attack Apex Dragon, which is where it really shines. For 2 grass and a fire, you can copy any of the attacks of your Dragon Pokemon within the discard pile, with some obvious inclusions being Dragapult EX, which you've already spoken about, Giratina VSTAR for that 280 damage, and Kyurem for its Trifrost attack, dealing 110 damage to 3 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. Given that so many decks rely on setting up with basics and stage 1s, this is insanely good, as just being able to knock out these lower HP Pokemon can prevent your opponent from setting up and effectively winning you the game. Matchup wise, it does lose out a little to Lugia VSTAR, since the deck is a little bit slow in comparison to Lugia's setup, and Arceus being out of range with Kyurem, and sometimes Raging Bolt, since Raging Bolt can attack pretty early. In addition, stall decks can also be a bit of an issue if there are a lot of Snorlax going around. That said, and given how well this deck has been performing, it wouldn't surprise me if Regidrago VSTAR ends up winning the Latin American International Championships and adding another victory to its name. And so there you pretty much have it. Those were our top 10 decks for the North American International Championships for the 2024-25 season. Again, these decks are all matchup dependent, and it's hard to say what deck will come out on top on the day, but this list should give you a pretty good idea. Do you agree with our top 10? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and your opinions as to what deck you think will win the event. And of course, not forgetting that if you do like this sort of content and you want to see some more content related to the Pokemon trading card game, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and of course, like the video, that would be amazing. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I will see you all in the next one.